Okay. So this is the second episode to our sociology podcast, well, sociology club podcast. So we're titling it the Change Makers. That's kind of like our new branding that we're going with this time. So today our special guest is going to be Dr. Sarah Pollock. So everybody knows who Dr. Pollock is. She's a professor here at Texas A&M. And I don't know if you want to give a little introduction to yourself.
Sure. I am a lecturer here at A&M. I've been here since 2019, and my specialization, so the things that I tend to teach are our intro classes and gender and sexuality classes, but I have many other classes under my belt at this point that I'm happy to talk more about.
Okay. Maybe after we do our introductions, we can get a little more into the classes. I'm sure students are very interested in that. So other than Dr. Pollock, my name's Miranda. I am the president of it feels weird saying that. I'm the president of the sociology club at Texas A&M. And then we also have Gabby Rios. She is the vice president. And we got
Hello.
Daniel here. Daniel is our social media coordinator, actually newly assigned a social media coordinator. And so as far as e-board members, that's all who we have today. But the purpose of our podcast is for students to get to know the professors, as well as we're going to talk about sociological topics, either on campus or off campus. But let's get into some of the questions. So one of the questions I did have for you is about your contact information and the classes that you do teach. Do you want to get a little more into that?
Absolutely. So I will go ahead and drop my email in the chat. Now, I know there are sometimes more than one email that you can use at A&M, but this is the one I tend to give out. It's Pollock, that's SPOLLOCK @tamusa.edu. That's the best way to get in contact with me. I usually try to get back to you within 48 hours. Hopefully I'm quicker than that, but that's my kind of deadline for myself. And then of course longer on weekends, but email's the best way. And then of course I'm in my office here on campus. I'm up in Cab. You can stop by anytime. Let's see, and then courses I teach. So I was hired by the sociology department to teach our intro classes, which are principles of sociology. And the kind of tagline that I would say for that one, the way I teach that course is how to think like an anthropologist. What am I talking about? How to think like a sociologist. I was talking about anthropological methods. So my brain's a little out there. And then for social problems, that's the other intro class that I teach. And that one is how to understand the social problems process. So not just looking specifically at one social problem at a time, but like how do we understand how they come to be social problems and what gets done to try to resolve them and the problems that come along with that. Why do we get so frustrated when things don't get done? Well, that course explains why. And then the electives that I teach, I have a gender course that I teach. Sometimes it's a 2000 level course. I teach a sexuality society course. That's a 4000 level course, often offered in the summers. There is a women of color, so looking specifically at feminist thinking and women of color's experiences in the United States, although also a little bit expanded beyond that. And that course helps you learn how to ask a research question and write a literature review on a topic of your choosing. And so that one I typically offer once a year in the spring. And then I also have experience teaching. Currently I'm teaching our methods course, so how to do sociological research and walking you through various tools in our toolkits as sociologists and you get a chance to kind of play with those tools. And then in our capstone course, I teach or have taught that in the past once and will be teaching it again in future semesters. And so in that course, you ask a research question, design your research project, do the research, and then write the whole research article, like a scholarly article, and learn how to do the whole process. So it's a culmination of your experience in the sociology major. I do have experience teaching statistics as well. So that's not at this school, but at my previous institution. That was probably too much, but we'll start there.
No, that was perfect. I think it's going to be great, especially for the new incoming sociology students to know what you offer, because some of that I didn't even know, and I'm a senior, so it's
Yay.
great. But our next question for you might seem simple, but I think it might be the hardest one. What is sociology and what does it mean to you?
I saw that question. I was like, oh no, take my class. But I think one of the most amazing things about sociology is just how broad it is, which is why it's hard to nail down one of those definitions. And so, of course, we all like to quote C. Wright Mills and say, sociology is the study of society, and more specifically, it's using your sociological imagination, right? This sounds familiar, yes? To connect your personal, everyday lived experiences with the broader social context in which we live, and especially thinking about how those social structures and institutions like our education system, our healthcare system, our government, race, class, gender, family shape those everyday lived experiences and social interactions. And so that that leaves a huge territory for us to cover. And so one of the things that I like to share with students is to say, if people are doing it, a sociologist is probably studying it. Which is what drew me to sociology in the first place. How do we understand people, why they do what they do, not just from like an internal personal level, but how are they moving in their cultures and societies? I think I might have forgotten the second part of your question.
Yes. Yes, the second part was what does it mean to you? Because that definition varies to everybody.
Exactly. And so to me, I came to sociology. I know this is kind of getting into how my journey came, my path went, but part of the appeal was, I live in a society and I face these social norms and pressures, and I want to understand where they come from. I was more interested in thinking about how those pressures and navigating your everyday life is shaped also by external forces, external to the individual, then I was taking a more individualized sort of psychological approach. And so that's why I think I went down the path of sociology, was because it was helping me understand not only why people make the decisions they do, but also that idea that different cultures, different time periods, different backgrounds will lead people to be making different decisions, and who's to say which one is right or wrong, right? How do we even judge that? So that's kind of the personal side for me of sociology, is really trying to get an understanding of people, developing empathy for people who are different than us, and then also how do we solve those social problems? So of the things that we struggle with personally, of the things that different groups suffer from, what do we do, right? So it's not just a study of, for me, it's also a what next? How do we make it better?
I love that answer. I feel like you touched base like with a lot of the other questions, but also you didn't give the full answer. But that was the most in-depth explanation of what sociology means to somebody. Because if you were to, I've asked other professors, I've asked friends, no one could really pinpoint a reason, but I think you put it into words.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the next question is going over like why did you choose sociology as your major? And you kind of touched some, bases with that. But maybe we can kind of turn it into like what was your sociological like college journey?
Oh, yes, because that was indeed why I became what I became. So in college, if any of you are like, I don't know if this is the right major for me, or I've switched paths, that was me too. I started out as an English, thinking I was going to be an English major, then went the path of I was quite good in French. Not to humble, that was not a humble brag. That was just an outright brag. When I was a high school student, and so I became a French major, and I continued to be a French major, and did the study abroad thing. Wanted to be either, I figured I could either be a translator or I could be a spy, and I was like, no, I don't really want to be either of those. But then I had taken, first I took a cultural anthropology class and I was like, oh my gosh, you can study people, you can study what people do. And then I took sociology classes and I had an absolutely amazing professor, Dr. Barbara Van at Loyola, what is now Loyola University in Maryland. And I just tried to take all the courses I could teach with her. Her specialties were also gender and sexuality. Hey, like, look what I'm doing now. Don't our mentors shape us, right? And she was so passionate and compassionate and empathetic and had such a social justice orientation that I was like, I think I want to be like you. Like this field has so much potential, not only for understanding, like I said earlier, um, our social world, but also for solving the problems in it. And so, so then I went to graduate school right out of undergrad and applied to sociology programs as a sociology minor, right? And that was my journey into higher education beyond undergraduate. Yeah.
And this is a question, a personal question, actually, that kind of goes off of that. Do you recommend if someone is going to go, to get their I mean, not their master's right after their bachelor's, do you recommend they go straight into it or do they take a little break in between?
That's a fantastic question. And like so many questions, I think it really depends on your path. Of course, there's going to be financial decisions that weigh in there. There's going to be questions about how motivated and prepared do I feel? Do I need that life experience or work experience that's going to shape my trajectory? For me, it made sense. And I was privileged enough to be able to do it. For other people, right, it makes sense to take time. But regardless of where you are, I think one of the most important things you can do is to think about what your intent is. What's my plan? You don't have to stick with it. People change their minds about what they want to research, but like, why am I going? What's my purpose for being there? Because if you have that and that compels you and that motivates you and sustains you, you can do it. If you need to figure that out, it makes sense to wait until you are ready, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. So the next question for you is, what made you want to become a professor in sociology?
Oh, I love this question because I was scared when I was so in graduate school. I don't know if folks are familiar with this, but in graduate school, as a graduate student, you take classes initially. So in your master's program, you would take classes just like you did in undergrad, except they're, 3 hours long. And sometimes, if the school has funding, and I would recommend that you try to get paid to go to graduate school, try to have at least a stipend or for them to offer you a line of funding, which means you can either be a TA, a teaching assistant, or an RA, a research assistant, but you don't go into a lot of debt in that process. But often that happens, sometimes beginning in your first year, sometimes for me, I didn't get offered a line of funding until my second year, but that's not a recommended route for most folks. And I started TAing, and it was for a statistics class. So not only am I like, oh, statistics, but I was also, oh my gosh, like I have to lead labs, like I have to be the lab instructor, I have to be the voice of authority and knowledge and guidance and mentorship. And I was so nervous, but I realized I loved it. Like I absolutely loved having those sparks of connection, being the kind of support that the person that students would come to, feeling like I was helping them on their path. And so that was like, oh my goodness, that's my calling, but I didn't know that. I didn't know it until I did it. And I didn't know that I could ever be comfortable in front of a large group of people. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny because me and Gabby were actually thinking about eventually becoming professors. So that helps a lot. It answered a lot of questions for me. I don't know about Gabby, but Okay, so this is kind of going off of the same question. The next one is, what is the best thing about teaching sociology?
Oh, so I realized I had a story. When I was a kid, there was this book, and it was about a woman who, as a young child, she's like trying to figure out her what she wants to do with her life. And she becomes an older, as she ages, like she carries these seeds with her, and she sows these seeds and creates fields of beautiful lupins. And by the end of like the kid's book follows her into her adult life, and as an old lady, she's kind of sickly and in bed, and she's looking out the window, and out her window she sees these fields of lupins that she has helped to plant and spread. And the kind of one of the messages in that book is trying to ask yourself, like, what can I do to make the world a more beautiful place? And so I always, the way that I kind of narrate my own story is like, I found the thing that I want to do to make the world a more beautiful place is to give that gift of bringing sociology, bringing mentorship, bringing a college education to students. And that was what I felt I could do to be the change I wanted to see in the world, to quote another famous person. And yeah, so that's kind of what compelled me to become a professor as well, and my path to where I am now.
That's very profound. That's great. For me, I was just like, I want to teach because I don't know what else to do. But for you, you have, this real profound reasoning behind it. And I love that. I think a lot of us could appreciate that and use that going forward.
And it doesn't have to be a professor. Sometimes people go into becoming a professor or an instructor or a counselor or, they whatever it is, they go into healthcare fields because they want to make a difference. And the question is sort of, what difference do you want to make? What do you feel excited about? What do you know deeply that you want to give to other people? And there's so many ways that we can do this. Whether it's knowledge production behind a desk or out in the field or working with people, there's so many different, we need all of those people to do all of those things.
Mhm. So the next question goes away from the teaching, but just kind of like your personal research. So it's kind of one question, but it's three in one. Do work with me. So what research have you done? Is there any research that you are currently working on? And what topic do you tend to focus on?
When I was an undergrad, personal note, I was really struggling with body stuff. And so I was like, why, like, where does this come from? I know it's not just me. I know this is really common for many young people, especially young women, but not only young women. And so I did a qualitative study of people working out at the gym and kind of what motivated them to go to the gym. And when I first started graduate school, I wanted to research eating disorder treatment, but again, not from a psychological standpoint, but from a what's wrong with the treatment programs that we give for people who need to seek to do in-house and out, actually both in and out outpatient services. Like, why isn't this working better? And like, what are the fundamental causes? And then that was too emotionally challenging for me to do. It was too personal, too kind of, it was too much. And so I said, okay, I'm going to shift that slightly so I can sustain this research and actually, get it done. That's another, the only, my dad used to tease me. He said, the only good dissertation is a done dissertation. And so I was like, okay, I need to do something that I can finish and just like want to keep showing up for every day and want to read about every day. And so I modified it. So I started looking at what is the social construction of fitness. What is this weird thing that people do, like this motion or like this motion, like that's so weird. Like, why do people do these exercises? What are they trying to pursue? So in part, I was asking this big question about what's the social construction of fitness. But then I was also, because of my training as a gender and sexualities, that was my specialization. how does gender have to do with the kinds of bodies that we're trying to sculpt when we pursue these exercise and fitness and diet and health changes? And then the kind of theoretical component of that study was to say, well, how does exercise and fitness professionals and this whole industry, how does that fit in with like physical therapy or health professions, like what the doctor's telling you, or popular culture and media? And so I was looking at fitness as a field in a Bourdieusian. So Pierre Bourdieu is talks about like cultural reproduction, like how do we perpetuate culture, and what's gained by having like a fit body? Like why is that something that people think of as attractive or something to be cultivated? And so I was using his theoretical perspective to make sense of like what people were trying to do, but also the tensions within the fitness field. So if you ask like somebody like, why do you read that magazine, or why do you follow like this expert's advice? They have reasons, and there's these this competition for legitimacy, these claims to like what is real knowledge and who you should listen to and who you should ignore. And so I was also fascinated by those kind of how people sort of elbow each other out of the way or say, don't listen to them, listen to us instead. So that was my PhD dissertation. So I did that research study. I looked at fitness magazines, did a content analysis of those, so like read all the stuff that was in those articles and tried to make sense of what was happening. I talked to experts, and by experts I define them as anybody who had something to say about fitness and was giving advice to the public. And then I also talked to people of the health at every size community, so people who are pushing back against this notion of healthism, like you have to be healthy or like your body has to look this way. There's they're kind of aligned with body positivity, but they're saying like you can be healthy at every size and you should find the movement and exercise that brings you joy, et cetera, et cetera. So like, what are these different groups saying about this one idea of the fit body, and how do we construct it? So that was a PhD. So my questions have always been, my deepest interests have always been motivated around health, embodiment, or the body, gender, and sexuality. But that leaves a lot open. And so currently, this summer, actually, I am gearing myself up to write a short book, which is going to be part of a series called the Explanations in the Social Sciences. And it's making an argument that we need to use social sciences in STEM education, STEM like science, technology, or engineering, math, and that this social sciences are a necessary disciplinary perspective in asking and answering really important questions. And so in that series, the book that I am drafting and writing and will be writing over the summer is about, we're not sure about the title, but it's something along the lines of, when is sex dangerous? And so it's thinking about the social construction of sex itself. When is it dangerous? When do we think it's dangerous, but it isn't? What are the debates and wars and cultural blowups that we have over questions of sex and sexuality? So that's the current one that kind of fits in with my what we call a research agenda, which is just like, what are the topics that you're most likely to, your work is most likely to gravitate around.
Will students have access to read this book once it's done?
Oh, yes. In fact, the goal of the book is to be accessible for like a public audience and especially like an undergraduate audience. So it's really meant to be like a short-ish book that helps you answer these big questions using social science research, but in a way that's really accessible and not too jargony and technical.
I'm very interested in that. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I want to be the first one. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, thank you. Maybe you can read a draft and give me feedback on if it's making sense.
Yes, I would appreciate that. I'm sure Gabby would too.
I do, but I want mine signed first. I want a signature.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, Sociology Club can host a book signing if you want to.
Ooh, we could have like a book talk.
Mhm. Okay, so two more questions for you, but the second to the last is, what sociologist inspired you?
I would say there are really two people. The first is my professor, Dr. Barbara Van. I mean, all the shout outs to her. She was my entry into the field. She was the person who showed me what was possible with this degree. I would also say that in terms of like a theoretical influence, I use Bourdieu for a reason, because he says like he was especially looking at the educational inequalities and the reproduction of inequality through the education system, which is supposed to be this wonderful way to provide people with social mobility, to provide people with access and opportunity. And he's saying, well, like, it's not doing what it's cut out to do. And so he has been a very important influence in my work, but also in my way of thinking about, we've got to get this right. We've got to address like social class inequalities, racial inequalities that we have the potential through the education system of changing, but don't always manifest in the way that they have the potential to do.
I didn't realize I was muted, sorry. But so the last question that I have for you that ties in with that one is there a certain study or book that you recommend for beginner sociologists?
I have so many that I would recommend. So is it possible to share my screen?
Yes, I can give you host privileges. One
Awesome.
second. Let me figure out how to do that first. I think I have to click on your name, make co-host. Okay, you should have privileges to do that now.
Awesome. All right. Good to go? Let me see. Awesome. Okay. So in thinking about what I would recommend, I have so many ideas. And the most important thing I would say is, if you tell me what general topic area of interest you have, there's a book for it. So the go-to places I would start with actually aren't books, but I will list all the books that I want to share with you as well. But this, sorry, I'm trying to find my chat. There we go. This magazine, there's also a blog, Context, is written by sociologists, and it gives you these kind of shorter research-based articles that aren't full-length scholarly journal articles and yet still have those grounding in empirical evidence or theory. And so they're accessible, right? And they're often on current events or topics and making sense of those through sociological research. So I absolutely recommend that. Same thing with Everyday Sociology blog, if that's one that you're not familiar with. It's, you know, the way they describe themselves right here is ask a sociologist. Do you have a sociological question? Can you think about everyday events using your sociological imaginations? And so there are, again, these like short blogs that cultivate that way of thinking about the world. Same thing with Crash Course Sociology. If you know that one, like that YouTube series has some great kind of overviews, introductions or reminders about stuff. And so I would also recommend that. Now, what are the things that changed? Oh, wait, there's one more. There's another book. Making a Difference is, I use this author in my Principles of Sociology class to help to try to help students start thinking sociologically. And this one is also written by him, but it's like, how do we use sociology to create a better world? So there's some, ideas about how we can do that. And then of course there's a whole host, and I'm happy to, maybe I could like compile a list and share it with you that you could disseminate. But there's a whole host of books that really made a huge mark on me as I was doing my dissertation, not my dissertation, as I was doing my graduate work. And so things like really challenging my assumptions about the welfare system. That was the American dream. This one, Promises I Can Keep, was really rethinking like what motherhood might mean to different people depending on their life circumstances, socioeconomic status, etc. Unequal Childhoods was a look at the way that we parent our kids, and in ways that like benefits them but also might harm them given the social school context, or the system, the education system. This one is a favorite for me, that I used to teach sexuality. So it's like a really nice introduction to thinking about the sociology of sexuality. If you, this Black Feminist Thought, anything really by Patricia Hill Collins, will help you think about the intersection of gender and race, if that's something that interests you. And then, oh, I can't say enough about Omi and Wynant, and thinking about how do we understand our current social context around racism in the United States. This is like an explanation of how we got here today. And then the other one, oh wait, I don't think I pulled it up, but the other one that I thought of was Racism Without Racists, which is by Bonilla Silva, and it's about like we claim to be in this like, oh, we're over racism, and like race, we no longer have to think about systemic racism. He's like, actually, we sure do.
Yes, I read that book for a class last semester, and it really opened my eyes to a lot. And I believe he also talks about like colorblind racism.
Exactly.
Yes. And I didn't really understand it, but as I kept reading, I was like, it's very in depth about modern racism and how we need to change how we see it. And
Yes.
it's great.
Yes. And there are so many others, but like I was just thinking like, oh, like there's all these different avenues that got me to where I am today that were part of my training, if you will, that might be helpful. But the place I would go for each of you is like, what are you passionate about? What part of the social world or people's experiences do you want to know more about? And then find a book that's accessible. Often journalists too. There's some work by journalists that is very much sociological.
Thank you for that. And if you could give me a list of that so I can also share it out with our club.
I would be happy
Whenever you
to.
get to it would be great. No rush for that. But so now I'm going to open the floor to our lovely students here who have joined us today. So if anybody wants to ask a question, to keep it, a little bit more structured, if you could just raise your hand, either if you have your camera on or do your little raise hand emoji, and then we'll get to you in the order that I see it. Okay, yes, go. I saw you raise your hand.
And me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I definitely enjoyed learning more about Dr. Pollock. I am currently taking her class, Social Problems, and I'm definitely learning a lot about how, like, spotting a problem, making that claim, and I definitely think that it's giving me the self-confidence to be able to know what to do when I see a problem and follow through with those steps. My question for Dr. Pollock would be about bullying as a social problem. It has been a problem for such a long time, and mainly I'm talking about kids and how they have to deal with that in school. Why haven't we been able to, with all the counselors and all the help, 21st century now, what's going on with that? Like, how can we, tackle that issue?
CJ Pasco, she writes specifically about bullying that happens around, especially young gay boys. And one of the things that she points out is that we say bullying, but if it were adults, we would call that harassment, right? We would potentially even discrimination. And so we need to recognize that what the kids are how they are bullying or harassing each other is a microcosm of what we're doing to each other as adults, the way our society is structured. And so counseling and support and resources at school are necessary, and we don't have enough of it. But we need to solve the social problems at their root before we can expect the kids to work out their issues. So like there was a kid Okay, I'm not going to take the time, but anyway, there's been a lot of of kind of things that my stepdaughter has heard in schools around racism, around sexism, around homophobia, and it's just, I mean,
Yes.
they're repeating what we see in the culture. So yeah, and that's, it's not like, oh yeah, okay, I know what to do now. I'm going to go out and solve, sexism, easy peasy. But I do think it's just a signal of what we're already seeing, are deeper social problems in the culture.
It's like multi-layered as far as too many different issues to tackle. And would there need to be more of a PSA or more community involved? I don't know, teaching adults, reteaching adults, I guess, the different social problems when it comes to the bullying and how that's affecting our kids. Like,
Yeah.
how do we go about that? I don't know.
I like your approach of using like a community intervention, because nothing's going to change if it's just like, oh, such and such professor says you need to do this in your school system. It has to
Yeah.
be needed and asked for by the community. But yeah, I think it's also about bringing the adults in, because we can't expect the kids to change if they're hearing that language or that treatment modeled at home too. Not to say it's the parents' fault, but what they see on
Yeah.
TV, what they see.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you.
And then
You're
one thing
welcome.
that I wanted to do, because as a victim of bullying in, in elementary school and stuff like that, I kind of wanted to start a nonprofit later where it's
Wow.
kind of like Dare, where they would go talk to the kids about don't do drugs. But instead we go and we give presentations on how to cope and how to, because
I
a lot
like
of
that.
kids don't learn how to cope healthily. I don't know how to say that, but in a
Yeah.
healthy way. So I was thinking maybe creating something like that where also we give training to the staff there on how to deal and how to spot the signs at a young age.
Oh, and Miranda, like I would jump off that too and say, how do we, how we do like bystander intervention training? I think it's the same thing. Like it means so much to have another kid say, hey, are you okay? Or to say like, stop, like that's not right. Like that's not funny. Whatever it is, like that's something I've noticed too, like with my stepdaughter's school, is that like it's also about giving other kids the tools to stand up for what is right.
Okay, so if no one has anything to add
I
onto
think,
that,
okay.
No, isn't there one more hand up?
Delisa, did you want to add to it or did you want to ask your own question?
Well, no, I do want to make a brief comment about that because, the social landscape has totally changed from, 20, 30 years ago, or maybe even less than that. How many different ways that the social structures have changed. And I'm speaking in particular about social media. And there's just there. I want to reiterate what Dr. P said, as far as unless we get to the root of the problem, it's going to continue like any social illness. It will continue to grow and wreak havoc because our culture just doesn't know how to hold little kids accountable. I mean, we don't have a socially structured thing for, you can say, oh yeah, report a bully to your superiors at school. Well, then that's a snitch. And then who wants to be friends with a snitch? So you have this weird dynamic in how social kids interact socially. So that's a big one. So I'm glad she brought that up. But no, I do want to ask my own question, and this is on a very, very personal note, because when I decided to go back to school, I have changed my mind. I don't know, it's like the seasons. But when I finally did settle down a couple of years ago and said, you know what, this is worth studying. This is being part of the solution and not being part of the problem. So that was just like on a real personal thing for me. But then my friends who are older, because I'm a little bit older than you guys, you could probably all be my children, but they would tell me, Delisa, why are you going to get a degree in sociology? what are you going to do with that? And it would make me feel so bad because, you know, I really didn't have a comeback for that, because I do not desire, I support everybody who wants to get their master's, go, PhD, do it. Some of us have kind of run out of time for that, life situations, but I don't know what a comeback is, because I don't know that I'm going to use it professionally to change the world, but I know that it's something that I strongly believe in. And so that's my kind of general question, Dr. P. How do I come back at these people? We're not sociologically inclined.
I hear that. And that is, you know, I think one of the things that I'd like to do more in the principles of sociology class is try to answer that question and try to give people the tools. So what I'm holding right now is a publication from ASA, which is our American Sociological Association. And the title of this publication is 21st Century Careers with an Undergraduate Degree in Sociology. And so if for most students, right, they are not going to be capital S sociologist, right? Cool. Like I totally get that. But my comeback is often you can do anything better if you have a sociological perspective, whether it's, you know, whether it's being a parent or a partner or a neighbor, whether it is knowing how to stock the grocery store in such a way that makes like certain products be where people want them, think they make sense to be, or if you're into marketing, like understanding marketing better. If you're a doctor, understanding why your patient isn't able to follow the advice that you give them. If it's thinking about how to, from the ground up, you know, combat your biases, whatever it is, like understanding different cultures and different ways of thinking, and how our social identities and the way that we've set up our systems shapes people's outcomes. I can't think of a job where that isn't important. But yes, I get it. Like it's not immediately obvious to people.
Yeah, exactly. And because they want to see, like, you know, you're going to be pre-med, you're going to be a doctor, your education, you're going to be a teacher, you know, and then it's like, yeah, you get it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see that the lovely Alyssa Lopez also has a question.
Sure, it's Elisa, but that's okay. I'm used to it.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. And I do want to comment as well. Like I know, Delisa, you like asked Dr. Pollock. I too am a little bit older. I'm 35. I'll be 36 in April. And I have had, and I continue to have my clients, because I'm a massage therapist, ask me what I'm going to do with a sociology degree. I used to say I'm going to burn it all down, but I stopped saying that because it's kind of weird, kind of scares them seeing as they're naked on a table and being massaged. Probably not the best idea to say that. But yeah, I mean, I think it also just depends on, you know, who you are when it comes to being presented with a question like that. And like Dr. Pollock said, as far as just like, I mean, now you do have a really good idea of what to kind of like how to answer it or what to say, but also believe in yourself. Like, you know how you're interacting with your friends, right? So like whether you kind of like joke about it or you can be like serious and be like, hey, let's also talk about like, why do I have to monetize off of a degree? Right? Like you can bring up like, we live in a capitalistic economy. It's all about exploitation in order to,
Yes,
right?
yes, girl.
So you
Yes.
can say things like that and being like, do you, that's up to you, right? As far as like, do you want to shut that conversation down or do you want to go like further into it? Like what, first off, let me ask a question to that question. Why are you asking that question? Like, you know, it's just, it's very, you and the situation. So you gauge it how you will. But I completely believe, and I don't even know you, that you now will have all those resources in order to pull from. But yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Pollock, I wanted to ask, what are you doing? And here I'm using the word doing, right? For your everyday, and you've told us in our women of color class to where like you have conversations with your partner's daughter, right? that feels like in a very like kind of like a nuclear family sort of setting. When it comes to anything as far as like outside of the home and outside of the university, how do you feel, and what do you do and or say when it comes to a situation that might come up, to where you can kind of be like, I mean, I don't know about anyone else here, but I can't turn it off now. Like now it's like the veil has been lifted and I go everywhere. And I'd be like, there's this, there's that, right? Like it's just very much, I don't know, we can call it like an awakening. But how do you, Dr. Pollock, like in a community setting, whether it's like a PTA meeting or something like that, and being like, you know exactly like, okay, I know what's going on here, and I can kind of be like, may I speak up, right? Like how do you do that?
I've seen models of that in various forms. I am so envious and admire so much the people who say, I am speaking truth to power and I'm using my voice and I am the one who's putting myself on the line to say, no, this is not right. And there are times when I feel more comfortable and less comfortable doing that, usually regarding the power dynamics and hierarchies at work. But I also know that I have a responsibility to do it because, right, I'm in a position of power. So my most comfortable zone to do any of that work is in the classroom and on very one-on-one settings. I think what you were saying earlier, Lisa, is like that you kind of feel out what is your relationship, what kind of fight are you willing to have in the moment, and not like fight like combative fight, but like how do I want to engage with this person at this time. And so there was a like one time, like I stopped a kid on the street who was throwing rocks at another kid, right? So that's like one way. But then like a different way is to sort of ask those questions. I heard a wonderful piece of advice the other day when you're talking to someone who you vehemently disagree with in terms of like position on an issue, that you're not going to necessarily change their mind by confronting them about it, especially if it's not someone you have a strong relationship with. But what you can do is you can ask questions, and then ask questions that sort of get at like what their understanding of the situation is, and then what they are fearing, because often at the bottom of a really strong stance. So this in particular, the situation I'm thinking about was around a grandfather, transphobia around a grandchild who had come out as trans and was sort of grappling. The grandfather was like grappling with gender and sexuality, and really not understanding the grandchild. And the advice, I was talking through this and I was saying part of what might be motivating that are like deep seated fears about what the relationship is going to look like. What does this mean for the future? What future did I imagine was going to happen? And so before you have a conversation about like what gender means, sometimes you need like that informative educational conversation. Sometimes you need the humor, like you said. Sometimes you need no, I'm just not doing this right now. And sometimes you need to develop that trust, that empathy before you can make any movement at all, because other people want to feel understood, and you can listen without agreeing, and then you can suggest, well, have you thought about what do you think is going to happen if what kind of relationship would you like to have with your grandson, and I'm much more comfortable in those one-on-one settings. I feel like I get farther. I feel like I'm able to hold my own. But I mean, I wish I were more stand up and cause a fight, cause a scene in public. Sometimes we need that.
I think, yeah, like you said earlier, it's just like, you'll know when it's like, oh shit, it's me, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, no one else, right? But I think you also know that because of all the practice that you've been doing with the one-on-ones. So, but yeah, man, confrontation is not fine. I don't enjoy it. That's why I kind of go more into like the jokes, right? But yeah, sometimes you just, I don't know. I forget what that, is it a story or something like that, as far as just like, oh, no one else is gonna do it and I'm thinking about it, so oh shit, it's me, right?
It's
Like,
me.
yeah,
Sometimes it's needed in certain situations,
right.
Yeah.
for sure. I've
I
been sticking up a little more than lately, so I
I
think it's
heard
all the
something-
education that I got.
I heard something one time and it said, say that, I was having this situation and I went to a mentor and she said to me years ago, she said, Delisa, you have a voice and you can always say what you mean, but mean what you say, but don't say it mean. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh.
because if I'm coming out swinging, because whatever, like Dr. P said, very invested in whatever, people have their stuff. We all have stuff, and I don't know where other people are coming for, and I don't know what their triggers are. But if I can say what I mean and mean what I say, but don't say it mean, it's a skill. It's a skill.
Yep. It really is. Thank you. Thank you all for all that. That was a great conversation that we had. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on from the questions. If y'all still have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have time afterwards, or if Dr. Pollock wants to stick around, we can maybe answer some of the questions. But we're going to move on to the next portion. So this is interesting. This is what we want to implement with all the professors that we are interviewing. So we're actually going to read some Rate My Professors and see if you have a rebuttal or if you want to comment. But when we were doing research, you actually only have one negative review, which is impressive. Me and Gabby were talking about that earlier, and you're the one that pointed out the negative one, so we appreciate that. So we're gonna read some to you. Gabby, do you want to read them or do you want me to read them?
Let me read. I want to read this one. And this is actually a positive one. I think this one comes from our campus. Awesome. So the student says that Dr. Pollock is an amazing professor. She is always full of so much energy, keeps class interesting. She's very sweet and understanding. She makes sure that her students do not stress too much, but you also have to do your part with assignments, participation, and attendance. And they said they 100% recommend you. So that is honestly so true. Whenever I had her first, I had just changed my major. I had her for principles of sociology and I think social problems. And she really does help you put things in perspective, but you do have to do your part to make those connections. So,
Yes, and then I want to read the next one. This one is also for our campus as well. So it stood out to me because I can agree with this, that the student said she is really nice and actually cares about her students. Her class was set up to where you had a summary and a discussion board per week and 3 mini quizzes. I totally recommend her. I wish I needed more sociology classes so I could stay in her class. She actually replies to emails and will let you turn in work late if you really need to. And I that one sticks with me because I feel like a lot of professors don't care about their students personally, and you put a lot of that extra effort into it, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, you are. I wish I had smaller classes, not because I don't want to teach more students, but because it gives you the opportunity to actually get to know each other better. And so one of my most favorite things is having students take multiple classes and we get to kind of work together over a longer period and we get to know one another better. And I get to watch you develop and your interests change and your path unfold. So yeah.
Okay, and now we're gonna go with the complete curveball. So I don't know if Gabby, do you want to read the bad one? Or do you want me to?
oh, I
It's
would
up
feel
to you.
bad, but I'll read this one. So this one's actually not on our campus, but you studied at North Carolina, right? For Charlotte University?
Yes, so I used to, but my first teaching job out of grad school was at UNC Charlotte, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Why would y'all read a bad one? Y'all are silly.
So we were just gonna read the 3 good ones, but actually Dr. Pollock pointed out the bad one to us. So I feel like it's fair.
Okay,
Honestly,
got it.
the purpose of this too is to show like the professors that they're amazing professors. I have so much respect for all the professors I've had so far. And I want to see too, like looking at other perspectives. That's the whole point of sociology too, is understanding other perspectives. And I
Okay.
wanted to relay this message to Dr. Pollock to see how she wants to talk about it, I guess. Get her input and when she talk about the experience, I guess. But this is actually from 2016. So, and the students said that they had underestimated the class. So there we go, underestimated class, gave a little effort. And they said that their grade went from a B to a D. And then they mentioned that she makes her lectures really fun. She wants everyone to participate in the discussion. And she said her only flaw was that she never answered emails for some reason. So would you like to have anything to say about that? Like any comeback?
I would love to. So I will say that one of the things that I always try to keep in mind, both as like a person and as a professor, is that like I don't know everything and I get things wrong all the time, and I can only get better if somebody helps me understand where I've gotten things wrong. And whether that's like in our women of color class, or we're talking about like me as a white woman coming from this very particular privileged position and not, being somebody who is a person of color who has those experiences, or whether we're talking about gender or sexuality, whatever it is, or whether it's like, oh my gosh, you assigned way too much reading this week. That was impossible to do. Oh, shoot. Like, I'm okay. Like, what can we do next time to make it more feasible where you're still getting the same amount? So anyway, like that's really important, because I need to improve too, right? Like I need to get better at what I do. And my goal here is to facilitate your learning. It's not for me to like dole out A's and B's. So that being said, like the email thing was one of the things that we strongly encourage students to do, is to use their university email address. We're not technically allowed to reply to emails from personal email addresses. So that's one thing. But this story was a little bit different. So I ran into this student, I think it was either a semester later or a year later. I'm like, why did you never reply to my emails? I said, oh, like, here, let's like pull up, let's see if I got them. And they showed me, and they had spelled my email address wrong, consistently spelled my name wrong every time. So that's kind of funny, because I really do try to reply to emails within a certain time frame. But if you don't send me the right email, or if you send it from your personal, that would explain. But typically what I'm saying is like, that's a unique circumstance, but I get things wrong, and I need to know that I've got them wrong, and I can only get better if I know, if things aren't working. So that's generally my response to students who have that critical constructive feedback, is like you said, Gabby, like we need to listen to those perspectives too. Like you read in the comment, it may be because the student, B to a D, wasn't turning in work, was consistently not taking feedback. Like that's an issue. But if it's something like, look, this is unmanageable what you're asking me to do, that means I need to rethink what I'm asking students to do. Right? And there's a back and forth there.
Right. And that also being, as a major of sociology, you also understand that context. There's that context to the situation. So I pointed out the year, which was in 2016. You were also talking about you were a TA at another university. You were learning how to actually step your foot in the water and understand how being a professor works. And then when I read through their thing, I wasn't trying to say anything bad, but they mentioned right there, they underestimated how your class is. You are amazing, and you also make it easy for us. So if you go in there underestimating it, thinking you're going to spoon feed us, that's not how it works. You're there to facilitate, as you said, those connections, to learn about the social world and society and look at it with that sociological perspective. So
yeah, and then the common theme between both universities is that you radiate a positive energy. You're always smiling, and you try your best to help out students, more personally and individually. So that's good. And that's good to know for anybody watching who hasn't taken your classes as well, that if you have an opportunity, you should take one of Dr. Pollock's classes.
it's 100% recommended. Take each one she teaches,
Yes.
follow her through each one.
Mhm.
And that's not something you can teach. That's truly, like she said earlier, it's a calling. And you can tell, students know when the teacher's in it, the professor is in it, because it's really meaningful to them, or when they're just, it's, yeah, I'll stop right there.
They have another purpose in mind instead of being a professor, basically. They're not
And that's
putting their
okay
all.
too. Yeah, that's okay
Mhm.
too. We all got to work, right?
Yes. It's equal work on the student side as well. So to wrap everything up, I just want to thank you for being here, Dr. Pollock, and I want to thank all the students that were here today. We had a bigger turnout than what was expected with our short, promotional period, but I appreciate it. We want to do this with a professor every month, so if y'all have any recommendations, let us know. But before we leave, Dr. Pollock, do you have anything that you want to leave us with? Any advice, phrases, quotes, or experiences, anything like that?
Oh, I always have so much to say. You're why we're here. Each of you is why we're here. Like especially for me. I want to help you learn. I want to help you succeed. Use your mentors. We are resources for you. I don't mean like use us and leave us, but I mean, office hours exist for a reason, and we're people. At the end of the day, we're just other people. Talk to us, whether it's about your research, whether it's about your coursework, whether it's about juggling something outside of class, whether it's about your hopes and dreams. A lot of your sociology professors come from that position of being really empathetic cheerleaders of you. And so it's something that I learned too late, or maybe not too late, but later than I wished I had, that these were just other people that I could talk to. They went to the grocery store too. They had heartbreak too. And so I think that would be what I would leave you with, is really strongly encourage you to talk to your professors. Oh, I appreciate all of you so much. Thank you for this opportunity.
And thank you again for, participating and being so easy to work with, because there's a lot of professors who take a long time to reply, and you actually do take that extra time and effort. We all appreciate it. And another thing for everybody in the call, I was just going to put like a little call to action to everybody. If you do not follow us on social media, we only have an Instagram right now and a YouTube channel. So all of our podcasts and meetings go to our YouTube channel. So you can just look us up, Tamusa Sociology Club. Yes. And then also our Instagram handle that our social media coordinator, Daniel, put in the chat is Tamusa_Sociology Club. So that's where we post everything. Got our link tree to all of our stuff. And we do have our meeting next. Is it next week? No, the week after next week. That's our next Sociology Club meeting. So if you don't already have us on JagSync, go ahead and follow us on there. That's where we send out emails and reminders. But other than that, if y'all don't have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to log off. And thank you so much for coming.
Great job,
Thank you.
Miranda.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Miranda too, and Gabby.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording.